Welcome, everyone, to the 30-minute Midas touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30-minute Midas touch. I am your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Maleficent, Mark Tipton.
Maleficent.
Maleficent.
Well, that one rolls right off the tongue. I'm okay. I'm looking. I do appreciate the monikers every week, as always. Maleficent. I can't even say it right. I'm gonna have to work on that and practice that one.
Most people didn't even know the word existed until the Disney movie came out.
But I do like it, and I do appreciate it. And we'll see how that works into this edition of the 30-minute Midas Touch podcast. I'm curious to see this one. But what we want to talk about this week is a subject that was kind of brought to the forefront by the announcement that Mickie James, who is currently the Impact Knockouts Women's Champion, is participating in this year's edition of the Royal Rumble match in the WWE. That kind of brought it to the forefront because it harkened back to the idea of WWE embracing something that has recently come to be known as the Forbidden Door.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where not everything you read on the internet is true.
No.
And this is one of those situations. Like I understand the thought process that WWE doesn't work with anyone else, and because they've over the last 20 years or so, they've tried to separate themselves even more from the rest of the wrestling business, and I completely understand that.
Yes. Well, yes.
But over the last couple of years, we've seen them mention Japan. We've seen them mention some of the other stuff,
Sure.
and they've obviously loosened up on WCW and things of that nature now.
Well, yeah.
But, I mean, the fact that people are saying, oh, this is the Forbidden Door, I mean, they finally did it. WWE was basically bankrolling ECW, right? I mean, that's
at one point,
yeah,
yes.
that's the theory, right? And, I mean, they've worked with the NWA. Remember when they worked with the NWA in the late 90s, too?
Yes.
I mean, and it's just not factually correct to say, oh, it's the Forbidden Door. I understand the thought process, like I said.
It sounds better.
But it's one of those things that it's a buzzword that's been created instead of, actually holding weight of truth.
Well, I have heard it said sometimes you don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Yeah, that's a good example of that.
And it is. I'll get this one out of the way to start with. When I saw this announced, well, first thing, it did stand out to me that they used the word Impact Champion when they referenced Mickie James. They announced her and they mentioned she is the Impact Champion. The thing that came to my mind, and there's no way for me to know this, but when whoever made the decision that say, hey, let's contact Mickie James, I wonder if they knew she was a part of Impact Wrestling at the point they made the decision to contact her.
That's a fair assumption.
I do not know. I'll never know.
That's an interesting thought process. Yeah, absolutely. I just, and this goes back to, we had an episode very early on in our podcasting careers where we talked about how promoters can't work together.
Yes.
And this is kind of a thing for me too. Like, okay, yeah, they're working with Impact right now. They're doing this little bit of business, but there's no way it's going to last long term. There's no way it can because at the end of the day, it comes down to you have to do what's best for your particular business. You know what I mean? Whether your business is Impact or WWE, you have to do what's best for you. So, and we saw this with WCW as well and WWE back in the day, or WWF back in the day. They didn't really acknowledge each other's world champions, remember? Like
Sure.
when Harley and Dusty came over to WWF, they weren't former 3-time NWA World Champion Dusty Rhodes.
No.
Harley was an 8-time. They were given completely new personas and gimmicks and things like that. And same way on the other side of the coin, when guys went from, WWF to WCW, like Davey Boy Smith, for example. Let's use that as an example because I'm actually in the middle of watching a lot of those pay-per-views that where he debuted. But like they didn't go, oh, former WWF Intercontinental Champion, Davey Boy Smith, because that's putting over the other person's brand. You understand? So I mean, there is a line. I mean, yeah, you don't want to ignore people's history necessarily, but at the same time, you have to find a happy medium in between the two.
All right. Well, looking at this narrow case, the thing that stood out to me, and maybe I'm a little too cynical on this, but I kind of felt like more it was WWE reaching out to Mickey James and not necessarily reaching out to Impact Wrestling. I think this is a convenient thing for Impact Wrestling in that they get to have their brand's name mentioned on WWE programming. I think that's why
where millions of people have never even probably heard of Impact.
Right, unless their television presence is very limited at this point. AXS Television, Access TV that they're on presently, is not, to my understanding, a widely distributed cable network. Their reach is not great. It's different than back in the days when TNA was on Spike TV. This is a very different situation for them, and having their brand mentioned on WWE television could be considered very valuable and well worth allowing. Because my understanding is that Mickey James is contracted to Impact, and so allowing her to make this appearance, which I suspect is something she wanted to do, and she was interested in, and that kind of thing, and allowing that to happen, it's a benefit for the advertising aspect for them, and then it'll, even though it may not have been intended for WWE to reach out to Impact Wrestling, so to speak. I suspect they may have called Mickey directly, and she said, hey, by the way, I'm a part of Impact Wrestling right now. I can't necessarily, I have to get okay to appear at the Rumble.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's a very fair assumption too. I mean, and the thing is too, it's going to be, obviously, it's going to be very well for Impact because, like you said, there's going to be a whole new host of people that hear about their product and hear about this. The problem is, and this is where it all lies in, is how is their product going to be represented on the program?
Yes,
You know what I mean? Like,
I'm being cynical again.
Exactly. Is Mickey James going to win the Royal Rumble, or is she going to get eliminated in the first 10 people? You understand? If she gets eliminated in the first 10 people, then you've just said, well, the Impact title is nowhere near as prestigious as these other 20 women that are ahead of her.
Okay, well, let me play amateur, I guess amateur booker here. If I laid it out. To me, certainly she's obviously not going to win the thing because as far as I know, this is the only appearance that she and WWE have agreed to have her have. Excuse me. But I think the best you could hope for is to have her have a long run in the match itself. Maybe eliminate several people along the way. This is a match that's going to include a lot of returning stars from the Divas era. This is, not anybody that they have long-term investment in, so they may well allow her to stay in the match for a long time, eliminate a large number of people, and kind of make a good showing before she's eventually eliminated.
Yeah, we would hope, but I mean that's
best case scenario.
Yeah, and that's basically what it boils down to, and this is what I try to make other people understand too. Is like everyone wants to talk about this pie in the sky, thought process that all wrestling companies can work together. How great would it be for all the fans if, this promotion and that promotion could work? Yeah, sure, yeah. This is a business, and we're trying to make money, all right? So, like, let's take WCW and WWE for an example. If at the height of that Monday Night War, if they had said, okay, truce, let's hold a joint pay-per-view together and have all these dream matches that everyone wants.
Yes.
Well, okay, we're going to have Sting versus Undertaker. Okay.
Yes.
Who the fuck goes over? Exactly.
Yeah.
Someone's going to have to give, and there's going to have to be some placating done on one side.
Who gets to make that call?
I mean, in WWF is obviously it was Vince McMahon, and WCW was Eric Bischoff. So I mean, usually what you do in that situation, if you have 8 matches, okay, 4 of them are WWF winners and 4 of them are WCW winners, but then
Which one?
Which ones exactly? So it becomes this human game of chess with everyone's careers, pretty much. Because I mean that's kind of what happened with when the we talked about this a few weeks ago too, when the WCW invaded WWF, right? And all of a sudden there was 30, 40 extra guys on the roster, and then like the guys in WWF that had been there for years are all of a sudden they're fighting for television time.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So is that fair to anyone else? So yeah, it's just people don't understand business sometimes. Like there's no in my opinion a way that two large companies like that can work together long term. Yeah, maybe they can have flash in the pan kind of stuff like we're seeing now, but there's no way it could last for a decade.
All right. I will try not to belabor this too much, but I will. My case for the best case scenario for the standpoint of Mickie James and her appearance in this match would be that maybe it's kind of a chance for them to make up for the trash bag incident as she last left the employment of WWE.
Yeah. Well, she's had a tumultuous relationship with WWE for a long time. I mean, Piggy James,
Right.
it still bothers me, because, in this, you don't ever call anyone old or fat because if you beat them, then all you did was beat an old fat person. If they beat you, then you just got beat by an old fat person.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? It's so simple when you break it down in that sense. So here they are. They're taking someone that's been a multiple-time world champ or Divas champion at that point and all that kind of stuff, and then they're basically just calling her, fat and Piggy James and stuff like that. And it was completely demoralizing to not just her personally, but like her career, her body of work that she had,
done and that had been achieved in your company.
So yeah, you're diminishing your own product.
Right.
In sense.
Yes, and I will quickly for those who may not have heard, when Mickie James last worked for the WWE, she was let go, and she had some belongings that were still left behind. My understanding is that the performers get a drawer in the traveling cargo racks or whatever they have, that she had some belongings that were still there. Those belongings were packed up into a trash bag and delivered to her in that manner. My understanding is that there was an individual who was let go as a result of this later on, but in any event, it really reflected poorly on the company when this came to public knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just one of those, and that could, like you said, that could be anything. I mean, WWE is a very large company with many working parts and things like that. There ain't no telling who actually did that, and if it was done maliciously or if it was just done because someone's a fucking idiot. But I would lean towards fucking idiot, just because having to deal with people on a daily basis on certain things.
Well, you're giving them a little more credit than I am in this case.
Right.
Just in the way I've seen them deal with talent that is on it, that is on their way out. I have felt their treatment of people in that instance has been less than professional, in my opinion, from time to time.
Firing CM Punk on his wedding day.
You hit right up on a perfect example of the instances that I have seen happen in the past. In any event, I want to try to broaden this a little bit away from just Mickie James.
Sure.
Because the phrase that is used is the forbidden door. Now, the forbidden door phrase is something that was popularized by the owner of AEW, Tony Khan. He referred to himself as the forbidden door, actually. And where this came up was when he started the working relationship between AEW and Impact Wrestling.
Right.
And that's really that the phrase became popularized there, and it's been applied to the Mickie James situation, among others.
Yeah, and I believe if you remember back when all that first happened, I said it's not going to last. It's going to be a very short-term thing. Eventually, some side's going to not get what they want, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, they don't have a working relationship with Impact anymore,
Yeah, and here this is another chance for you to correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost felt like more like an opportunity for friends to hang out. Kenny Omega, now the Good Brothers, Anderson and Gallows, or a part of TNA, or Impact Wrestling now. And it was like Kenny Omega went there. Now, it did play into Kenny Omega's quote-unquote belt collector thing he was doing at the time. So it did kind of play in that. But Impact says, hey, we get to use Kenny Omega, a current world champion, on a little bit better known promotion at the moment. To try to help sell our pay-per-views. And Gallows and Anderson get to hang out with Kenny a little again like they did back in Japan blah 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 blah, and actually they spent quite a bit of time on AEW programming as well.
Yeah, and I think this all boils down to,
Who you know?
Tony Khan being a money mark. That's all he really is. People want to say like he's a booker. No, he is a money mark. Period. They're milking him for as much money as they can while they can, right? And this is one of those situations. I'm pretty sure Don Callis, because he's not a dummy.
No,
He's a very smart guy. So I
No.
imagine he saw that and saw his
And-
friend Kenny Omega over there
orchestrated.
all this. And sure enough, he's going to get paid by AEW because he was on plenty of AEW television.
Yes, he did.
Right? And same thing with the Good Brothers. I mean, they end up being on there quite a bit as well.
Yes, they
so,
did.
I mean, it's just another payday for them,
Mm-hmm.
And, we're here to Forbidden Door, Tony. We're here to help, oh, yeah, cash this check, sign this check for me.
And it did make me wonder at the time who was really the deciding factor in bringing that relationship to an end. Now, Don Callis allegedly fell out of favor with the other people involved at Impact Wrestling to a large degree, and I wonder if Tony, this may be a case where he's learning as he goes. He's coming in an inexperienced person in the production of professional wrestling. He's coming in this, and he's learning. Essentially, he's learning as he goes on a nationwide, distributed television show. Maybe he realized as he went along that the situation didn't really benefit him to a great deal, and he was essentially being taken advantage of. You think he may have learned that and said, "Hey, this is going to come to an end," or do you think it was Impact's part wanted to bring it to an end?
There's no telling. It's such a hodgepodge of whatever over there. But like for me, it's a situation like like I said, everyone can't work together. Everyone can't really coexist. Like they want to. So it's almost like they're just I'll tell you what, Nick Bockwinkel. I heard the story from Nick Bockwinkel once. That was this guy was talking about how, and I think I may have told the story on here before, but it's worth another lesson. So Nick Bockwinkel basically, he was working in some territory, and a kid came up to him, a younger wrestler, and was like, "Oh yeah, so and so's doing a really good job booking here." And apparently, this territory at the time had Nick Bockwinkel and a bunch of other really high established professional wrestlers. And Bockwinkel kind of looked at the kid and said, if you give an artist, the best paints and the best brushes and the best canvas, they should be able to paint you a masterpiece. It's when you don't have the best of everything and you can still paint that masterpiece, which makes you great, right? So I think Tony Khan is getting a little bit of a big head and a little bit of a rub because AEW is doing well, you know what I mean? But I think it's on the shoulders of guys like Punk and Daniel Bryan and some of those kind of guys that are workhorsing it and making him look like $1 million just because you guys can wrestle each other. That's not necessarily booking, you understand? Like, because I don't agree with some of their approaches on how they dealt with some of this stuff, but the matches themselves are what's really carrying it right now.
Yes, well, imagine that, selling professional wrestling.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I feel. I guess the thing that plays into your kind of viewpoint on Tony, and I think this is something where he may have gotten fooled a little bit, is because I did watch at the time, and on Impact Wrestling, he was making regular appearances. They were paid. It was portrayed as though he bought time on their television show to post an announcement, but it was kind of like he got to appear on there, and he was essentially kind of portraying a heel character, and I think they may have taken
He was Vince McMahon coming to Memphis.
Exactly, and I think they may have appealed to him as a fan, because as a fan, your chance to get on there and kind of play that role out is something that you'd find very appealing, and they may have taken advantage of that, his status as a fan, and kind of appeal to that and say, hey, you can do this, to try to pull him in to do, their pay, get their payday you were describing, and maybe he came to realize what was going on and said, hey, how about we bring that to an end?
Yeah, it's just it's one thing after another. I mean, Tony Khan is gonna do what Tony Khan wants to do. I don't think there's anyone that can tell him differently.
Well, maybe his dad. That's about it.
Yeah, if he cuts them off.
Yes,
right?
that would be it.
That would be it. And that's what I've always wondered too. Like, how long can they let this go on? Because I know they're not turning a profit yet.
That's what and to me, it's I have a hard time understanding and knowing because I did hear some things that during the pandemic when they were stationed
Yeah,
at Jacksonville.
yeah, I heard that too.
Uh,
And that was like I said, that was a smart. They're the only ones that the pandemic actually helped their business because they were trying to go city to city on a tour and do their television and stuff like that, and it was tanking.
yeah.
Badly because they didn't understand because like I said, every major company that's ever done anything, they've all started out as a studio wrestling whatever,
Sure.
right? And that's kind of what they had to back up and punt and do. They had to end up being like basically a one location, show, so they could, and that's when they started actually turning a profit. Now here they are, they're back on the road again, but now they've added Daniel Bryan, they've added CM Punk, they've added Christian, they've added a bunch of high dollar guys.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I can only imagine what their bottom line looks like now.
It does wonder. I don't know, because it depends on what their deal is with TBS TNT. Did that when they just recently moved the primary show from TNT to TBS, which seemed to come about as a result of TNT signing the deal with the NHL. And because I believe their NHL program is going to be on Wednesday nights going forward, and that seemed to initiate the move of Dynamite to TBS.
And that's hard too. It's hard to change channels like that.
Right. Even changing time slots.
Yeah.
It came up. There was a period where, for a couple weeks, Dynamite aired on Saturday instead of Wednesday.
Yeah.
And the ratings suffered as a result.
Yeah.
And because you develop a habit of people.
Yeah.
I know. Well, Monday Night Raw, for instance, we know Monday Night Raw is Monday Night Raw, and we tune in whether football is going on or not, anything on the USA Network, with the exception of the Spike years.
Yeah.
But Monday Night Raw on USA, there it is, and that's steady.
Yeah, that and there was a few times where Raw was preempted for remember the dog show.
Well, that did happen once or twice. Yes.
And I can only imagine what the rating. I've never looked at the ratings for that,
No.
but I imagine that hurt them too.
Yes.
It's just like you said, wrestling fans are creatures of habit. You know what I mean? We're the same way here. Like in 7 years at Pro Wrestling Mid South, we've canceled 2 shows, maybe. You know what I mean? So like, we're always every Saturday night bell time 7:30, every Friday night bell time 8:00. It's you have to be there because not everyone's. I've had promotions where they go, oh, we're going to run bi-weekly. Well, that is a death sentence because then you have your fans going, are they wrestling this week or are they off this week? We don't know, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And it just ends up being a mass confusion kind of thing. You have people show up that they thought it was the week on and it's actually the week off. And now they're pissed off at the company because they, see what I'm saying? So it's a lose-lose situation. So, yeah, if you have a steady whatever it is, no matter what you do, whether it's a television program you're producing or whether it's a spot show or you're running monthly in a town or whatever it is, as long as you keep that same schedule of, okay, the first Saturday of every month we're going to be in this town, you can make it successful.
Okay. Yeah, I just wondered if maybe during that change happened, we saw TNT, TBS, or I'll just say Time Warner, however you want to say it, when they decided and wanted to start the Rampage, they wanted another hour programming. And I wonder if maybe, the deal changed in some way, made it a little more advantageous. And I do, supposedly the last pay-per-view or two did sell well, but as you mentioned, they've also taken on significant salaries recently. So how is that balancing out? I don't know. And then the lucky thing for them is they're privately owned. They're under no obligation to tell anyone what their numbers are, as opposed to
you could probably goad them into telling you. You could if someone of high enough stature within professional wrestling called them out on Twitter.
Really?
Yeah, I can almost guarantee you Tony Khan would bite
well,
immediately.
See, this is where Mr. Khan's inexperience, and I won't try to be respectful here. There was a instance recently where a AEW wrestler was released and kind of had some unflattering things to say. And Mr. Khan, what would have clearly been the wise decision would have been to absolutely say nothing.
Right.
He decided to respond on Twitter and made the situation worse for himself and his company.
Yeah.
I think that was a sign of his inexperience, in my humble opinion. And so maybe someone could do that, but I've always felt that WWE going public was a bad mistake.
Yes.
I think
Well, anytime you let a corporate structure enter professional wrestling,
right, I think it's a bad idea.
It's a bad idea.
And so I hope Tony takes a lesson from that and would not take the bait, but recent history would suggest he might.
Yeah, absolutely. And the situation Mark Tipton is dancing around so delicately.
Yes.
Is the situation with a young woman named Swole.
Yes.
And she shouldn't. And like we said before, she shouldn't have been on television anyway. She wasn't ready for television anyway. But that's part of their thing is that they put so many people out there that are inexperienced and not really ready for national television. And here was a situation where that happened. And she got hot when she said there was no diversity. I think that's a little off the wall because if anything, AEW is very diverse.
Yes.
They pride themselves on having black and white and brown and yellow and
Yes.
and trans and straight and bi and whatever it is.
Yes.
They proudly talk about that kind of stuff. So I don't think that was a thing. But like you said, he basically said that she wasn't good enough to be in his company, which was simultaneously stupid and funny all at the same time.
Well, essentially, it seemed to me that there was no good answer he could give back to that, and so the best thing to do would be to not press send on the tweet. I guess I don't use Twitter. I guess it's send that you hit or whatever, enter, whatever it is.
I don't even remember. I use it. But
Yeah, whatever it is, whatever button it is you push to post a tweet. Don't push that button in this instance. There's no really any response he gave would not be received well, so don't give one.
Could we see Vince McMahon do that?
No,
Some disgruntled wrestler makes some statements about him, and then Vince gets on Twitter and like, hey, listen here.
No, that now they may speak to one of their talents who may get on Twitter and the thing that comes to my mind is Seth Rollins has been an individual who I've seen when the WWE is criticized. I've seen him kind of take the lead in responding on Twitter.
Company man.
Yeah, he's playing the role of the company man. Whether I agree with it or not, that's what he's doing. I understand, but I don't see Vince McMahon doing it himself. I think he may. I think he has an account, but I don't think he actually runs it.
Yeah.
I don't think Vince McMahon sits on his phone and posts tweets. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
He may have someone assigned to handle his account.
But when you're the owner or the president or the CEO of a major wrestling company or whatever it is, you have to create a line between yourself and the talent sometimes on something. Obviously, guys you're gonna become closer to a Brock Lesnar and an Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and guys like that. But for guys that don't reach that level, you have to have a barrier between you as far as this goes. And that's a prime example of it right there is like Tony Khan doesn't have any barriers. You know what I mean? Like it's like a big clubhouse where everybody, does this and says that. And, I'm sure they're all pitching ideas and wanting to do this. And like, he's too accessible. I know that sounds weird, but like he's too visible and too accessible to too many people.
Yeah, and in fairness to Mr. Khan, I this is where I will try to stick up from here. I think this is a gentleman who is learning all these lessons on the fly on a very big stage in relative terms. A lot of people might have learned this and on smaller promotions working their way up to growing their territory. He started out essentially at a nationwide level.
Yes.
And you mentioned about the talent that may not have should have been on television at the time. Well, A, he wouldn't necessarily have the experience to know who should and should not be on television. And B, unlike the WWE's, for instance, when they started NXT, they had a large number of people under contract. And they had the FCW developmental territory already before they took their NXT product to nationwide on the WWE network. They had experience and access to talent, things that he was kind of winging as he went along. I will try to grant him leeway on all those things, and it's just unfortunate for him. He's on a very big stage making rookie mistakes, so to speak.
Yeah, and the people that he has in his charge that are supposed to be honest with him and give him honest feedback are not giving him honest feedback. If he says I want to book this guy in this angle,
Right.
they'll, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. They don't. There's no, that sucks. That's not gonna work.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it just seems to be like we've said it before, that the inmates running the asylum.
And this, we really got onto a tangent here, but it is something that interests me immensely. And I wonder if one of the rumors that got out is that the EVPs have been kind of moved out of the booking department. It's something more he's taken over, and all right, we'll quit dancing. I'm talking about the Bucks.
Yeah.
Primarily, the Bucks, Omega, and Cody Rhodes were EVPs who, at least at the outset, seemed to be in charge of the creative decisions.
Yeah, their own creative.
Right.
And that's where the issue lies, because, like, if the Bucks are in charge of the tag division, then what's the tag division going to be focused on?
Right.
The Bucks. Then Omega was in charge of his segment. Cody was in charge of his angles,
Exactly.
and you can't do that. I've said it before. You and I couldn't write a book where I write the first 3 chapters and I tell you to write the next 3, and then I come back and write the next. It doesn't work like that. There should be a continuity between everything.
An overall vision.
An overall vision, and overall, we're heading in this direction, and that's primarily what's been lacking.
Right.
And they give away huge matches for nothing with no.
Yeah. Now you may be talking about like the first appearance on TNT with the Danielson Hangman match.
Well, I'm actually talking about the Danielson Omega match.
At the
That should have been something that should have been saved
for a pay-per-view.
Well, the next year maybe.
Yeah.
They could have built that for a year. I mean, I understand he was going to take some time off, but still, imagine when he comes back, if that was his program.
Yeah, I think that may have been New York City. Sometimes other things play into people's minds, and I think making a big showing in New York City was something that appealed to him. And I think wanting to make the big impression on the first night of TBS may have, like people mentioned that the battle for the belts recently was somewhat lackluster, but it came just a short number of days after the debut on TBS when they'd really loaded up for that debut.
Right.
And and so they kind of didn't have any other, headline matches to really put on that show.
Sure.
And that's all those things are things that he may learn with experience. I don't know how we're doing on time, but
We are over time.
oh, excuse me.
Not too bad. We're closing in on 32 minutes. So
was it Maleficent?
yes. So for myself, the Golden Boy Greg Anthony, and for my co-host, Maleficent, Mark Tipton, thank you and goodbye.